Okay, great. Okay, guys. Thanks for coming here on this exciting live session on generative AI. We have a few minutes waiting for everyone just joining us here on this session. I hope you are doing well. And yeah, Federico, by the way, I'm glad that we can see your real face here, not the deepfake model generated by AI.
Yeah, it's all me. It's all me. It's all real.
Yeah, certainly we
For
can
better or
laugh
for
about
worse.
it. Yeah, we can laugh about it, but still, it's getting scary. I mean,
Yeah,
speaking about AI, it's incredible how rapidly it's advancing. I mean, sometimes it feels like things are spiraling out of control, doesn't it?
for sure, 100%. So I've been following the space for a few months now. And by the way, just 6 to 9 months ago, this whole generative AI thing was something very niche that only people very
Yeah.
active on some weird Substacks and Reddit forums were aware of. So it's been super interesting to see that become mainstream and really get onto everyday's conversations. So yeah, definitely exciting.
Yeah. It's become incredibly hot topic, and I believe many people still underestimate the power. It's the true power of it, right? Like
100%.
think about it. A, uh, AI tools like Midjourney, I don't know, ChatGPT, and deepfake technology, along with rapid development of robots, are all converging now. And have you seen those mind-blowing videos from Boston Dynamics?
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
Those
the progress
robots
that they've made in
performing
the last 20 years.
backflips, moving heavy objects, and
Yeah,
easily navigating surroundings. And it's, oh my God, what's going on?
yeah, it's a very fascinating space. But I think like what really interests me, and hopefully the people that will join us today and through the course of the webinar will also start to appreciate, is that all of this can be really abstract, really futuristic, really fantascientific, but it has real everyday implications and use cases that many people still underestimate. So if there's one takeaway that I would hope people will walk away with today, is that everyone can use generative AI. Everyone can use what we're showing you today for the better, right? To improve
Yeah, beautiful.
productivity and yeah. So we'll see a bit more of that later on.
Yeah, I think it's no need to worry about a robot uprising just yet, right? So yeah,
Exactly.
we will dive into the exciting realm of generative AI and explore its potential application and how it's basically reshaping the finance industry today.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, please buckle up and get ready for this informative, entertaining, and thought-provoking, I guess, webinar session, right?
For sure. I'm looking forward to it.
Uh,
I think we're coming up to time. We have
yeah.
24 people in.
Yeah, I think we can start basically. So for those who just joined us, hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on generative AI for data analysis in finance. So first of all, I want to take a moment to make sure, guys, you are can see us and hear us clearly. Please take a moment to check your audio video settings to make sure everything is working fine. If you experience any technical difficulties, please don't hesitate to let us know about that in the chat section below. We'll fix it as soon as possible. But yeah, sometimes issues may arise on your end. So in such case, please, first of all, try to refresh your page first or double check your connection just to make sure everything is plugged in properly. And yeah, regarding these ground rules that we have here through the webinar, please remember to, first of all, to mute yourself to avoid interrupting the webinar accidentally. Write your questions in the Zoom chat and we will answer them during Q&A session at the end of the webinar. And also, please remember to use Zoom reactions in the chat to express yourself. And of course, spam, insults, and third-party links are prohibited on this session. So yeah, and here I have a question. For the first question here, Federico, it seems like this topic is important for everyone, but perhaps it could be like particularly beneficial for certain professionals, right?
Yeah, 100%. So today we are coming in from an angle that's specific to finance and data analysis. We designed the webinar for finance manager, analysts, accountants, and really anyone who's interested in generative AI and its practical applications in the context of financial analysis. Now, however, this is obviously a really broad topic, and we're trying to appeal to a really broad audience, because if you think about it, data analysis, Gen AI can truly be leveraged anywhere at any time. So hopefully through the course of the webinar, if there's anyone that fits those categories, they will be hopefully more vocal, more participative, but anyone really that is interested in the topic, I'm sure they will walk away with something they can use. So I'll pass it on to you, Mike. Some high-level introductions before we get going.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Federico. So yeah, get ready for this extraordinary session filled with valuable insights and surprises. Yeah, this is going to be an exciting 90 minutes live session where we embark on a journey to explore generative AI and financial data analysis in the realm of Excel, of course. But here's the best part. Not just about theory. We believe in hands-on learning and interactive experiences. So that's why we have something special prepared for you. It's a captivating ChatGPT and Excel demo that you'll be witnessing really soon. And also we've got something truly special prepared just for you. So fasten your seatbelts, stay tuned until the very end of the webinar. We are about to show you how you can unlock the full potential and make the most out of this incredible experience, right?
Correct. So there are three main topics or areas that I would love people to walk away with today. We'll cover those in a second, but the webinar, we will start high level with generative AI, make sure everyone's on the same page and grounded on the principles of Gen AI, and obviously ChatGPT will get deeper into the details. As Mike was alluding to, there will be a very interesting back and forth between ChatGPT and Excel. We'll learn how to troubleshoot formulas, how to build reporting. We'll obviously be high level today. We'll do a lot more in the course that we'll talk about more at the end, towards the end of the session. And then we'll close off the 90 minutes with storytelling. I'm super passionate about storytelling. Conveying the results of one's analysis is obviously the most important part of the journey of putting something together. And so being able to convey the insights the right way, according to the audience that you're interfacing with, is genuinely as important as building the analysis itself. So we'll talk a bit about that. We'll learn how to leverage ChatGPT for that reason or purpose as well. And yeah, so as I was alluding to, we have 5 main sections today: Gen AI, ChatGPT, Excel, data visualization, and storytelling. I think we covered this already. So without further ado, Mike, if you tell us a bit about Elevator before we get into the details and open it up to the floor.
Yeah, sure. Let me tell you a bit more about our online educational platform. Yeah, so Elevator is basically established educational group. We are based in the UK, in Germany and the US, actually originally from the US. And we've been on the market for 7 years now, and we've taught more than 90,000 students across 40 countries. And we offer high quality courses with industry specific experts from global and local companies like Amazon, Google, Pepsi, Microsoft, IBM, and many more. And we give on these sessions, we give live Zoom lessons with hands-on approach, learning management systems, and dedicated customer service. And yeah, now let's go to the next slide. So let's take a moment to introduce ourselves. Please write, everyone, please write right now in the Zoom chat your role, your company, where you work at, and city of birth. And the main point, right? What excites you the most about generative AI in data analysis? And while our attendees are introducing themselves, Federico, you'll be the first one. So please tell us a bit more about your professional background, experience in Amazon and Amazon Web Services.
Of course. So yeah, I will take it away. I hope I'm not distracting anyone, but I'm Federico Maffini, originally from Italy, as both the name and the accent probably gives away. Studied and lived abroad for the most part of the last 10 years, really. Started off in the Netherlands, but then my career really began in Luxembourg, where I stayed for 3.5 to 4 years in various finance roles within Amazon. I then moved over to the UK. I continued a bit in finance, and then became I left finance behind to get closer to customers, deeper into the business. I became a program manager, also in the transportation space, but I started to learn about customer experience, customer support, fascinating topics that were really, really far from sort of what I'd been used to until that point. And more recently, I say recently, it's been like over a year now, I moved over to AWS to lead business management within the customer optimization and enablement team. Ours is a very large organization. We interface directly with customers, and I have the pleasure of leading a large team of program managers and analysts who really provide technical support and analytical support to the wider organization that we fit in. And so throughout my experience, I've sort of built and led teams of analysts, program managers, but I think at the foundation, really, there has always been finance, and there always is finance and data. And so throughout the course, throughout the webinar, I really wanted to get you on part of that journey. It's obviously reductive, what we can do in 90 minutes or even in a 6-week program, but there's definitely nuggets of knowledge that I would love to share with you all. So that's it. Like outside of work, I enjoy wine tasting. I enjoy collecting watches. That's not true. I only have 1 or 2 pieces, but those are my passions. I enjoy tech. I enjoy what's always on the next sort of cusp, on the cusp of the next wave and craze. And so, yeah, Gen AI definitely fits the picture. If I quickly go to the chat though, let me just see who we have. We have people from Australia, Amazon, awesome. Finance manager, that's great. Alejandra writes us from Chewy, awesome. Welcome everyone. All right, so type away. Let's break the ice a bit, and then I think we are good for a quick poll. Let me just try and launch this. So we'll try some of the features of Zoom. Bear with me. Hopefully everything will work out as expected. You should see a questionnaire that pops up on your screen. If you wouldn't mind answering, just to gauge a bit the audience we're dealing with. Are you using generative AI in your everyday work? All right, majority of no's. Okay, very few yeses, definitely a little speaking up. Fascinating. Awesome. So I really hope that by the end of the session, we'll change that a bit. We'll get the balance a bit more skewed towards yes, because it's really easy. It's really straightforward and it's really intuitive. Nice. Why don't we get going then? I can let the poll go on for a bit. As Mike was saying, like, feel free to use emojis or reactions to what we're discussing. If there's any questions, use the Q&A section. We'll have time dedicated at the end to go through those questions. So I'll love to do that as well. Awesome. So let me just share the results. You should all see what you all voted. And with that crossed, we will move on to generative AI. Exciting. Now, a few caveats before we get into the details. I'm definitely not a developer, definitely not a someone with a high enough IQ to really explain all of the intricacies and the technicalities behind the models. But I think it's worth grounding ourselves in some high-level notions, just to understand where we're starting from and what we're dealing with. So generative AI obviously is very different to traditional AI. I'm sure everyone's heard of it, AI, machine learning by now. Now, traditional AI was designed and was always built with the intent of recognizing patterns to make predictions. Now, algorithms that, one example before we get further into the details is an algorithm that can distinguish between pictures of cats and dogs, right? You feed into pictures of animals, you train the algorithm to recognize cats and dogs, and eventually it'll be able to tell you which one is which. Awesome, very straightforward. Now, the applications of traditional AI are obviously like countless, and the limits is really the sky. But the distinction with generative AI is that Gen AI creates images, audio, text, bodies of text, and much more in response to prompts that are provided by us, the users. And so here, if you think about it for a second, like the distinction is massive. The models were obviously trained on a set of data that was fed into them for them to understand, for these models to understand sort of the context, to have some sort of knowledge regarding the topics of interest. But then what we do from there, it's really up to us. And it really comes down to the quality of the prompts, as we'll talk about in a second. Now, within generative AI, there's many different categories and families of models. I'm showing you 5 on the screen. We're not going to go into the details of those, but it's just to say that everyday applications like the Netflix recommendation system, the Spotify recommendation system, are real life examples that I'm sure you all have come across at some point of generative AI. In this case, restricted Boltzmann machines is what power Spotify and Netflix algorithms. Now, we have other examples. If you look at the left-hand side, generative adversarial networks, they're mostly used to generate images and audio in response to prompts. There's plenty of websites out there. If you spend 2 minutes on YouTube, you will see like an incredible number of videos regarding these applications. Now, ChatGPT is a transformer-based model. Transformer-based models were actually first came around not that many years ago. I could be mistaken, but I think the white paper that explained transformer-based model only came up in 2015 or 2017. Right, so imagine that it was just not even 10 years ago, that before that transformer-based models didn't even exist. Since then, they've made so much progress that we have applications like ChatGPT, DALL-E, Stable Diffusion, and many others that all stem from that white paper. Now, ChatGPT is obviously what we're talking about today. Just one of the many out there, is definitely the most famous, and so we decided to go with that one. Google have their own, Amazon as their own, and so forth, right? ChatGPT, before we get into the sort of the real use cases and the back and forth between me and it, I just wanted to explain a bit about ChatGPT as well. There's 4 main pillars that define and characterize ChatGPT, if we think about it. The first 2 are really theoretical, really conceptual, more than the second 2. So training and prompts. Training is obviously what is necessary to all sorts of AIs, whether it's generative or traditional. The models have to be trained. They need to have been fed with data on a particular subject or a variety of topics for them to really learn how to interface and engage with you. So ChatGPT went through extensive training. It was fed into over 176 billion parameters were provided into ChatGPT, into the large language model that powers ChatGPT at least. And it's all text-based data that was scraped from the internet, obviously publicly available data according to records. And this is what helped ChatGPT learn grammar, learn different languages, learn writing styles, and everyday knowledge, as we will see in a second. Now, all of this is only as useful as the quality of the prompts that are used to get the information back from it. And so prompting has really become an art. And even more so in image-based sort of generative models, high quality prompts and the instructions that you use to get the output back is really what sets the output apart. And we will see that even with ChatGPT. But if you want to take a bit of time, like if you want to explore further Stable Diffusion and DALL-E, DALL-E is also a product of OpenAI, which is the same company as ChatGPT. So if you subscribe to ChatGPT, create an account, you can also use DALL-E as a result. So if you play around with DALL-E, you will see that the more basic your prompt is, the more basic the image that you get back. And so if you were to write things like, oh, I want to see an image of a flower on Mars during a thunderstorm, it will give you that, right? But the more elaborate the prompt, the better the quality of the output. The same goes with ChatGPT. And there is a reason for that, right? And the reason can be found in the last 2 pillars of ChatGPT, tokenization and attention mechanism. Now, it gets a bit more technical here. I will be very high level anyway. But you will see the real implications of these, especially attention mechanism, just in a second. Now, tokenization is what allows ChatGPT to split the prompts that are provided into it in either single words, parts of sentences, or even individual characters to dissect and analyze the meaning of the sentences provided into it. This is super important because by sort of dissecting the sentence that, or the body of text that's providing into it, ChatGPT can be really selective about what it is processing and trying to understand. And it does that through tokenization. And this is at the core of transformer-based models, by the way. The architecture that powers these models was revolutionary because of the concept of tokenization and the attention mechanism as well. So ChatGPT, in fact, can analyze all of the characters that are provided into it at the same time. And so in parallel, it can discern which words and parts of sentences to focus on, thanks to the attention mechanism, to understand the meaning of what you are trying to providing into it. So I'll give you a practical example, because I appreciate I'm talking a lot and it can get confusing. If I were to type into ChatGPT, I am Italian and therefore I speak ... and I would love for ChatGPT to answer that question. The only word that ChatGPT would have to understand of that sentence really is Italian. Everything else, yeah, it's additional context is necessary for the model to give me back a response that answers to me, as in I am Italian. It could have been, Mike is Italian. So the answer would have had to understand the difference. But at the core, there is only one word that makes the output different. If that word was to be French, I am French and therefore I speak, the answer would be different. And so that is the attention mechanism. The attention mechanism is super complex, super important. It obviously goes much beyond the single word of a sentence, and it can really help ChatGPT understand the meaning, between quotation marks, of what you're trying to providing into it. So these are the four main pillars of ChatGPT that we will see in action in a second. Now, I need to switch screens. So if you give me just 1 second, I will move things around. Just bear with me, and we'll get going right away. Awesome. Okay, so here we have ChatGPT. Hopefully you're able to see the chat, or the white page. Basically, it's a super straightforward and very simple design. There's really nothing else on the screen that can be confusing or sort of staying us away from the core of it. So you obviously need an account. Once you register, you have access to the free version of ChatGPT, which is ChatGPT 3.5. There is also a paid version, which I have just for the sake of the webinar and the course, but you don't really need it for what we're trying to do today. So let's try what I was saying earlier, right? I am from Italy, and therefore I speak, let's see, Italian. Great, right? That's it. That's as simple as it gets. Now, ChatGPT, there's obviously an abundance of applications of ChatGPT. Let me try actually do one thing here. Hopefully you can see Excel on the left-hand side. Now I'll keep that on the side. We'll get further into the details in a sec, but I just needed the data here. So typical applications of ChatGPT. There is obviously the sky's the limit, as I used to say earlier, but there are a few things that I really like, and that I think are really, really envy. Now we use ChatGPT 4 just because it's a bit more elaborate, it's a bit fancier in the outputs, but again, you don't really need it. So on the right-hand side in Excel, I've pasted a very long article that I found on New York Times. So, and I want to ask ChatGPT to give me a summary because I don't have time to read for like 10, 15 minutes, a article that I found online, right? So summarize this article for me. I'll paste it in. Don't have to worry about formatting or anything. As you can see, it's an extremely long article, right? Let's see what we're getting back. Now it's thinking about it. One thing I should have mentioned, ChatGPT 4 is a lot slower than ChatGPT 3.5, just because it is a lot more powerful and a lot more able to understand the semantics behind the inputs, right? So you can see that in the outputs as well, but if it gets too slow, we'll move back. But yeah, so it's now summarizing the article for us. If we start to read through, we can get sort of the idea that it's talking about the D-Day sites in Normandy and so forth. Let's say this is still too long for us, right? Too long. Give me 3 bullet points. That's it. So now I don't even have to spend 15 minutes reading a whole article. ChatGPT is done that for me. It's giving me 3 bullet points. They're actually factually accurate because I did read the doc, the article, so I know these are a representative of what the author is trying to tell us. And that's it. There's really 3 core themes behind the article. ChatGPT nailed that. And that's it, right? Super straightforward. Took me 2 seconds, back and forth. I can take this a lot further. I wanted to give you actually an example, practical application of memory, because ChatGPT does have memory, which means it can remember the conversation that happens within one of the chats. So you need to be careful to stay within the chat. But it will remember all the answers, all the context, and you can go back earlier answers further down in the discussion, and it will be able to pick up where it left from. So we'll see that in a second here. I don't think I have enough to do that, but we'll do that. So let's take this a step further. Let's say I am one of those LinkedIn influencers or a Twitter persona. I want to have a new post to share with my audience. Can't be bothered to write it. So make it a catchy, punchy, and this is where the quality of the prompt actually comes in, because I could decide or pick completely different attribute, and the output would be dramatically different. So I will show you that in a second. Make it a catchy, punchy LinkedIn post. By the way, the grammar is not a problem with understanding anyway. Post that I can share my audience. All right, so now it's understanding that we want something for LinkedIn. It will start to use emojis and things like that. And hopefully we'll have hashtags and things like that that can help us boost the reach of the post. Now, while it works its way through it, do I believe that this is good enough for me to sort of copy paste it into LinkedIn and be done with it? I do not. Not because it's not, but because I would always want to add my personal touch and make sure that I sort of provide my distinctive sort of signature into whatever I am taking out of ChatGPT into the real world. Do I have to though? Definitely not. If you take a moment to read this, it's a perfectly phrased set of sentences that are actually correct. They read well. They're good enough to go out there, especially considering the quality of the usual posts on the internet, right? Now, that being said, let's move on. I wanted to give you a couple more applications. I have here on the right-hand side a email that actually I've asked ChatGPT to write for us a while back. Let's open a new chat. These, so let's say I have just received this email. Summarize it for me. So first and foremost, this is again a very long email. It came from the CEO of Pantita, which is a company that we'll work on later in the webinar. This is obviously everything's fictitious, but again, I'm asking for a summary first, and then I could leverage ChatGPT to provide an answer to that email that I got. Now, I could do 2 things. I could ask ChatGPT to simply answer. So write me a polite, refined answer to say to the CEO that I want to help with vision, whatever. There's basically this email talks about 3 big issues that the company is facing, and it's also providing 2 really positive counter arguments or investment opportunities that the CEO is considering. And so our email could, this could definitely be the basis of a good email that we send back to our CEO. Alternatively, and this is something that's actually more interesting, normally I would first draft an email or a body of work, a document, it could be anything, right? And then I could use ChatGPT to refine that right up. I could use ChatGPT to elevate the style, the grammar, the structure beyond what not that I couldn't do it, but that I might not have time to do or the willingness to actually do it myself. So this is the response I drafted. Can you help me elevate it and make it better? Whatever. Now we're using very basic comments here, but I want to get onto Excel, so I think we're good to go a bit faster here. But yeah, ChatGPT has taken our response, which was really sloppy, right? Hey Marco, thanks for the heads up, shedding the light on where things stand economically and so forth. The reins rugged. Now, this is definitely not how we would respond to a CEO of a company. And so this version is a lot more polished. It's a lot more emphatic, or less emphatic rather, more politically correct and more balanced. Awesome. All of this took us literally no time. Now, some other real life applications of ChatGPT that I really love, I put them there. We're not going to go through all of them, but you can use it to generate food plans with recipes, grocery lists, ingredients, like down to the detail. You can build training plans, right? If you go to the gym or active, you can use it as your personal trainer. You can ask ChatGPT for recommendations, right? For travels, visits, restaurant booking and reservations. You can generate content. You can do anything really with ChatGPT. You just need to think about it and sort of iterate through it, because the responses might not always be the right ones right away. But if you chat through it with it, you will definitely get there. So I hope you find it interesting, definitely fascinating to me. This is really high level, really basic applications. But let me quickly go to Excel. Before doing that, I actually wanted to tell you what we will do in a second. So we'll use ChatGPT to generate and troubleshoot formulas and to help us with storytelling. Now, in the course later on this summer, we'll actually go back to the topic, go a lot deeper into the details, understand how to leverage ChatGPT for decision-making, scenario analysis. We will integrate it directly in Excel, which can be done. There's a bit of a hack there, but it can be done. And we will ask ChatGPT to consume data and build us data that does not exist to help us with the analysis of whatever we're trying to learn or to apply. Super interesting. It's a fascinating topic, ever evolving. But yeah, why don't we go back to ChatGPT? I will try and squeeze everything. Actually, let me open a new chat. We'll continue to use ChatGPT 4. Mike, sorry, I'm not monitoring the chat. I've run out of real estate on the screen here. Let me know if there's anything that needs addressing. Otherwise, I'll carry on, yeah?
Yeah, actually, we have one hand raised in the chat. So yeah, let's take a moment to answer the question, right?
Sure. Let me do one thing then. Okay, got it. Sorry, 1 second. I can't see the question though.
No, it was a raised hand by someone, by Blurte. Can you see in our list of participants?
Yeah, let me, I need to unmute.
Yeah.
Yeah, unmute. Can you unmute yourself? Does it work now?
Yeah, Blurte. So try now to unmute yourself and you'll be able to ask a question. Yep.
All right, we'll push it to the Q&A, Blurte, if you don't mind, just for just for the sake of the flow. Cool. All right, so let's get into the details back and forth with Excel. As I was saying, we are an Italian shoe manufacturer today. We only do made in Italy. We distribute across Europe. All of this is not really relevant context, but it is important to get into the habit of explaining the background to ChatGPT, because the accuracy of the output will improve tremendously. So let's move on to Excel right away. So we have, I'm obviously starting from the assumption that we barely know how to use and navigate Excel. On the left-hand side, we have the markets where we sold our shoes to, units, average selling price, average cost per unit. And we want ChatGPT to tell us how to calculate the profit per unit. Now, one thing I want you all to understand and to appreciate is that in this prompt that I'm pasting into ChatGPT, I am explaining what the columns are, right? So I'm explaining, okay, in column A, there's the unit sold, the ASP is in column B, C, the COGS is in column D, and so forth. And I want to calculate the profit per unit in column E. I'm not actually explaining ChatGPT how to calculate the profit per unit. And so this is the first thing that can really help us understand how to leverage ChatGPT, even when we don't know what we don't know. In this case, we don't know that the profit per unit is simply the difference between the two, as ChatGPT is telling us, by the way, but we don't need to. The only thing we know is that we want a profit per unit, and that's enough. And we will see that throughout the run through, right? So ChatGPT is explained that what this whole thing is giving us a lot of context, is giving some caveats. I make sure that this is the case, the COGS is in B2, ASP is in C2, and so forth. But at the core, if we copy paste the formula, we have exactly what we asked ChatGPT to get us, which is the difference between the average selling price and the cost per unit. Great. Now let's move on. We don't need to change chat because we are talking about the same thing. The model is the same. Appreciate this for a second. I'm no longer explaining where things are. I'm just carrying on. I'm just adding on top. I've just said now, okay, calculate the total revenue in column F. ChatGPT remembers which of these sort of parameters, what parameters are where, and it can tell us what formula to apply, right? So B2 times C2, it is actually the units times the average selling price per unit that gets us the total revenue. This is gross revenue. We can probably go back and forth with ChatGPT and have a conversation and ask it to explain us things. But regardless, for the sake of the presentation, we'll carry forward. And let's assume, I don't know why my prompt says net revenue. It should have said like profit or net profit, but it doesn't really matter. Let's see what ChatGPT gets us. Let me just move this a bit. So it's explaining how to, oh, this is fascinating. So we have the total revenue minus, and I'm just typing it, it's quicker, minus the units times the cost per unit. So a big caveat or a big limitation of our data set is that the cost per unit, the cost and the average selling price were both per unit, on a per unit basis, right? And through the flow, we had calculated the total revenue, but we had not calculated the total cost, which we would have needed to subtract from total revenue to get to the net profit. Now, ChatGPT understood that on our behalf, right, without necessarily having to explain it to it, and gave us the right answer, which is super interesting if you think about it at a technical level, right? Now, in practical terms, this is obviously really basic math, really basic finance. It's not even finance, it's just like, yeah, basic Excel formulas, but it's just to give you a hint of what you can do. I'll take that a step further. This example is really fascinating to me. Let me resize things a bit. So in this example, which I'm going to go through the prompt in a second, but here I'm explaining ChatGPT the output that I want, which is a complex scenario, right? I want a cell in K1 where I can select the shoe models that are in either column A or column F, doesn't really matter. I want to be able to dynamically select the shoe model amongst the ones that I have. And I want to fetch the number of units sold the previous month, right? Last month. Now, this is a much more complicated scenario, if you think about it, that requires intermediary steps. It requires the use of functions that live within Excel that go beyond formulas, right? And so the first thing it tells us is to create a dropdown in, say, in cell K1. Let's follow the instructions for a second. I obviously know this by heart, but it's telling us to go to data validation, which is hidden here just because I have it a condensed window, otherwise we would see it. Data validation is then telling us to go to list, telling us to go to source, selecting the range of the shoe models. It's it's telling us to go from A2 to A100 and to adjust the range depending on the actual data, because we didn't tell it how many rows we had. So it's telling us to do that. To hit enter, and here we now have a dropdown with the shoe models, which is exactly what we wanted to see, right? Without knowing about data validations, about lists, about any of that, we still got the results that we're looking for. Then the second step is telling us to copy paste that formula, which is a very simple VLOOKUP. It's explaining us how it works. It's explaining how to resize the ranges, which we don't need to do really. The formula works. So rose pink, if you go through the list, rose pink is here. Last month we sold 545 units. That's exactly what our model, our report, more than model, what we wanted it to do. If we change it to sunflower, 355, the number is correct, and I can go on, right? Now, again, this is really basic application of Excel, but it's just to open your mind and your eyes to the potential that ChatGPT has, even when it comes to Excel formulas. Now, since I know a bit about Excel, let's say I didn't want to use VLOOKUPs, or I was looking for an alternative to a VLOOKUP, just for the sake of it. And so I'm asking ChatGPT for an alternative without explaining what alternative I'm looking for. It's telling us to do XLOOKUP. Let me just stop it right there. Let's say, what about index match? And so now it will tell us how to use, the fact that we can use an index match instead of VLOOKUP is giving us the formula, which we'll paste. The result is exactly the same without having to change anything. Now, this is super interesting, right? Super fascinating. Nice. So we went through this example. Let's go back to the sort of business case, quote unquote, that we were trying to go through. We're a shoe manufacturer, and unfortunately, like most companies out there, we have creditors that owe us money. So the next step of the report, we want to find a way to write pre-populated emails to the list of creditors that owe us money so that we can chase them for whatever amount they owe us. Now with this, we will take it in 2 steps. Stick around because the next step is the VBA part of Excel, super fascinating application for sure. And that's where ChatGPT really excels. Coding is one of the things that it does the best and to the most granular level, and it's really mind-blowing. Now, before we get there though, let's say that we had a list of email addresses. How's they usually look, right? We scrape this from a database, from a list of subscriptions, from the email list that we share with the customers that purchase anything. And so this is our list, right? Great. Obviously, every email address looks differently. In this case, I made it fairly straightforward for us. We have a name first, followed by a period, and then a surname. So in Excel, I can easily type the first name and the last name of the first item on any list, really. And then if I go to data, go top here, in the top of this ribbon, data tools, there's flash fill. This function lives within Excel, right? Everyone has it. It doesn't use formulas, but it understands patterns. Similar to traditional AI, if you think about it, it understands patterns and it makes predictions. So here it's understanding that the pattern of the first 8 is string of text, period, other string of text, and it can understand that and give me the first name, no matter the number of characters, right? This is the complex part. However, when that pattern breaks, and all of a sudden I have dashes, underscores, the formula stops working. This is not even a formula, this function stops working. If I do the same with pony, it will work because the pattern is again the same. It's looking for the @, which is there all the times, and everything and a character before that. Now, regardless of what the problem is, we definitely have 2 email addresses that we were not able to extract the first name for. Now, obviously, many different solutions. I could do this manually, fair enough. It's only 2, no big deal. Now, obviously, we can ask ChatGPT, if we ever were to be in that situation, to give us a formula to do that at scale. So now I'm explaining that in column A, we have a bunch of email addresses with the format. I'm explaining everything, right? Now I'm waiting for ChatGPT to tell me the results. Now, when I did this today, it was actually very interesting because it forced me to go through an intermediary step, which doesn't seem to be the case today. So this will work better. It will be more straightforward. But today, it made me clean up the email addresses and remove the dash and the underscores in those that needed changing, so that the following formula would be more straightforward. Right now, it's not doing that. It just gave us a formula that's complicated, that we don't need to understand. It doesn't look, it looks ugly, actually, as a matter of fact, but it works, right? It's isolating the name, the first name. I can do the same for the surname. The formula gets more complicated there because the logic is more complex. We need to understand the middle point, right? Where to start counting characters from. And we need to understand where to stop counting characters, which is at the @. So this is basically what this formula does. But we don't really need to understand that, right? I didn't even bother reading the whole spiel that ChatGPT is providing me because I don't need it. Great. So now we have first name, last names on the back of email addresses, the credit, the amount that each of these people owe us. We want to go to the next step and build something really fancy. We want a VBA macro that sends emails, which you need to draft for me, filling everything yourself, no placeholders. So a list of debtors to ensure they pay their due amount. Now we're explaining where the data is. It's in a sheet called find, which is the previous sheet that we were on. The full email address is in column A. The amount owed is in column F. And I want the body of the email to be generated in a new spreadsheet where I can copy paste in Outlook at the click of a button, right? Now we provide that command in. Now this will take a while because it's writing a VBA macro. But as it does that, it will also explain us how to enable macros or VBA and how to go about sort of inputting a piece of code into Excel. Personally, 10 years into using Excel almost every day, I still don't know how to really use VBA. I always try to stay away from it, but I think this is really breaking down the barrier. I no longer need to do that. I no longer need to spend hours Googling sort of prototype queries or comments. Then I need to tweak and troubleshoot and go back and forth. This does it all for me. So I've copied the macro. It's telling us what to do. So we need to do Alt F11, I believe. Exactly. It's open on a new monitor that I have here. So this is the macro window. Let me just bring this up. Apologies, 1 second. Okay, so you're seeing this. So it's telling us to go to insert, module, and paste the macro in here. There's nothing that we need to change because we told ChatGPT to do everything for us. We close this, go in here, add a button. I know how to do it, so I'm just doing it. I don't think it explained us how to create a button. We can ask ChatGPT how to create a button. We associate that button to the macro. We have a button. So let me try this. How do I create Okay, that's what it makes to run that one. Okay, let's leave that work away. But now I have a button, I click that button, and all of a sudden I have exactly what I was trying to get. Where is what I'm looking for? This. All right. So this is to make it a bit easier to read. So we have email addresses in column A, because obviously we need to paste those into Outlook. We have the email in column B. Dear Jolly Pony, find you well. We're writing because yours 999. Let's go back to find real quick. Jolly Pony 990. Perfect. The second one, friendly rabbit 279. Friendly 279. Perfect. The macro works. Now, as a matter of fact, you will probably notice that we have a little problem here, which is the fact that we have a couple of lines that don't really match or belong to any of the creditors that we had. And that's because we didn't explain to ChatGPT that the macro should have stopped at row 11. So it's just carrying forward until it finds the last piece of string, which in this case is this one box with some text on it. And so fine, this is just a mistake that we could have easily fixed by going back to ChatGPT. Great, so we even built a VBA mark. Now I'm gonna take it all to the next step before we close off this first part of the webinar with something like a bit more advanced, a bit more in the finance sort of remit with a typical P&L. Now the P&L, interesting enough, was generated by ChatGPT itself. But this is how any P&Ls really looks like, right? We have revenues and costs at the top. We have a bunch of operating expenses, other incomes or other expenses, depending on how what our company looks like. At the end of which we have our net income, which is the most important piece of information in this whole thing. Now, let's do this, right? Let me show you 1 second. I will just go to a new chat just to keep things clean, ChatGPT 4. So my comment is that this is the P&L Pantita across Jan, Feb, March 2023. Can you give me risks and opportunities based on the P&L? Now, how do I input the P&L into ChatGPT, you might wonder? But technically, actually, that is a lot more straightforward than I think. You paste it in. You don't need to worry about formatting. You don't need to worry about anything. Let me expand this for a sec. ChatGPT can go past that, right? It doesn't need formatting. And it's now telling us what the risks and opportunities are. Now, to go through this all sort of back and forth, it will obviously requires a bit of time. But at the core, it's telling us about the rising cost of goods sold. If you look at this for a sec, you will see that the cost of goods sold is actually increasing systematically month over month. It's telling us about the operating expenses, which you can find them in this section, right? The total is here. Oops, yeah. Total operating expenses, similarly to COGS, also increasing. It's actually telling us why. Salaries and wages, which is here, rent and utilities, which is here, marketing, advertisement costs are incrementally increasing each month. This is like fascinating to me. And we're really at a high level. I could go like deeper into the back and forth if I were to ask it probing questions. Opportunities, fine, fair enough. Now, why don't we try perhaps that concept of memory or back and forth? So I just wanted to give you a snippet into that. So let's go back to the third risk. Tell me more about it. So here, I'm not even explaining like what I'm talking about. I'm just saying the third risk is actually 1, 2, 3, increasing research development cost, right? And it can navigate the conversation just off of that simple comment. So now it's telling me about everything about research and development, new projects, initiatives, efficiency issues. Fine, fair enough. We don't need to know all of that. But I can definitely use ChatGPT to take my analytical skills, or at least the analysis on the back of this P&L, a step further. I will show you that right now. I'll stop generating that. So I want to calculate standard ratios between the P&L, based on the P&L that I pasted earlier. Now, everyone that has dived into finance for a bit knows, or even studied finance at uni, knows about ratios. The most common ratios, you can find them here in the hidden rows: profit margin, operating profit margin, expense ratio, net profit margin, right? There's obviously a lot more of those. Based on the P&L that we provided into it, these are the ones that it could calculate, right? If we provided an income statement into it, or a cash, as opposed to a cash flow statement, as opposed to a balance sheet, the answer would have been different, because each of those is obviously subject to different ratios. Now here though, look at this. It's telling us the gross profit margin calculated divided by the gross profit and revenue. And it's obviously a percentage. So it's telling us the numbers, which numbers in each month. Let me do one thing, right? Let me say that I really like what I'm seeing, right? I appreciate it, I love it. I want to build formulas in Excel, right? So great. Give me formulas for, say, gross profit margin, so I can add it to the P&L. Okay, let's see what happens. Gross profit margin. By the way, look, I'm using acronyms. It understands that. It's like incredible. So, okay, here it's not really doing what I wanted it to do, because we didn't explain where our data was. So we would have to explain, okay, gross profit is in row 4. Let me see if we can get there. I have gross profit in row 4. And so we need to divide it by revenue, and revenue in row 2. What formula do I use? Like, this is obviously a really dumb example, but I'm trying to get to the point where it tells us the formula. Let's see. Okay, great. So we're getting there. Assuming the first month is in column B, which is actually the case, you should do B4 divided by B2 times 100. Yeah, I can definitely share the workbook as well. I don't mind. I was reading the chat just now. But yeah, you get the idea, right? And if you have time, you can really go back and forth. Now, I want to take this one more step further. I want ChatGPT to draft a leadership-facing email that I can send back to my leadership. As a matter of fact, let me delete this. To explain the performance based on the P&L I pasted earlier. Again, note how I'm not providing the P&L again. I'm not going back to it. I'm just saying I need a summary of the performance. Now, what happened last time I was doing this offline, I skipped the whole section on the ratios, and yet this email that he provided me had all of these growth rates that you can see here in the body that ChatGPT calculated itself on the basis of the absolutes that I provided into it, which is obviously, like, it's obvious when you think about it. It's the thing that any finance analyst would do. But we didn't have that in the data that we provided into it, right? That we pasted in. So incredibly interesting. So it's telling us the total revenue in March 2023, we continue to experience positive growth, which is true. The revenue totaled 190,000 euros, which is a growth rate of 8.6% over February, which is true. Not only is it true, but again, it was not part of what we told him. So yeah, what did he say? 8.6%, right? Is the growth between March and Feb. So now I have a fully flashed email that I can copy paste as is if I wanted, or I could iterate on to explain the performance of a P&L. This is super interesting, at least to me. It fascinates me every time. And that is it, really. So let me quickly take a pause. I will pause the screen share for a moment, reorganize things. And I think we can take a short break. Mike, if you don't mind, maybe taking that away. We'll get a glass of water and then we'll go back to the questions, perhaps.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Federico. That was really insightful, like mind-blowing, I would say. what you're doing here with ChatGPT and Excel. Never think something like that. Yeah, utilizing AI in this context, I think, revolves around formulating like specific and precise requests to the system in order to obtain the most relevant outcomes, right? And I think probably mastering the skill in, I mean, and grasping the fundamentals can significantly enhance your productivity and efficiency and your workflow in general. So yeah, you can learn that how to use AI. So it's available not just for experts, data scientists. AI tools are performs like begin like to being user friendly, and you can perform the same as people who can easily write the code, easily moving like on this Excel modeling, and you can do it with ease. And I have personally witnessed individuals using generative AI for different purposes, ranging from insightful financial data reports and to creating engaging marketing contents, even creating music, or people developing sites from back to front end just using this tool. Yep. Yeah, that's amazing. So yeah.
No, sorry, Mike. I was just gonna pitch in there because obviously we didn't cover that part, but you could genuinely build websites from scratch, even iPhone applications or even Android apps with ChatGPT without knowing a single line of code, without knowing anything. It will guide you through it. Now, someone said it in the chat, I can't find it now, but it really comes down to the quality of the inputs. So you no longer need to have subject matter expert. You do need to have subject matter expertise to really gauge the output that you get back. But you don't need to know the technical details on how to get to the output anymore. That is done by ChatGPT or all these Gen AI tools. You just need to be good at providing the right inputs and assessing the outputs. And so, and that can be learned, right? Like anything.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And imagine the possibilities of using AI to generate accurate financial models, perform data analysis at an unprecedented scale, or even automate complex decision-making processes, right? Easy.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're an expert, of course, if you know what you're doing, basically.
For sure.
And with the right knowledge and tools, we can leverage AI to augment our capabilities and achieve like outcomes that were previously I don't know, unimaginable. So yeah, let's go forward, right? And let's master this technology a bit better, a bit more. And yeah, Federico, so let's go.
All right, so now we're getting into the second part of the webinar. We're talking about data visualization. Apologies. I'm monitoring the chat. We'll go back to the questions, right? Just bear with us. We have a dedicated section at the end. So data visualization. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, I'm really passionate about storytelling. And I think 90% of the value of a piece of analysis, any piece of analysis, is in the way the data and the results are conveyed to the audience. And I wanted to show you all today an example of how not to do that. And then together we'll go through the steps to refine and tweak whatever it is that we've put together, or that sort of our analytical team has put together, if we assume that to be the case, so that we can come up with a much cleaner, much more straightforward analysis. So I would love to ask you all to take 30 seconds to look at this graph and tell me if you think this is a good graph. Does it tell you a story? Do you know what it's talking about? Do you know what it's representing? Or do you find it complicated? You can use the chat, use the emojis, whatever. Just let me know. Percentage of tickets sold by month. Good guess. It's the wrong one. Anything else? Anyone? We have two bars, numbers, bad view. So this is customer support tickets. CS tickets is on the title. We have tickets, exactly. So it's query responded. Yes, it's inbound tickets, the blue columns, versus the tickets that are actually processed by our customer support team. Okay, so still, even with that clarification, I'm pretty sure that many of you would miss the key point that this graph is highlighting. And it wouldn't be your fault. It's just that this graph is not really clean. It's not telling a story. And it's definitely not the best version it could be. We're missing the so what. The cognitive load to decipher what it is trying to tell us is extremely high. And we don't know what to do with this information, right? Let me show you a slightly reworked version of that graph. Now, I'm sure this is starting to get a lot clearer. So we still have customer support tickets at the top. We have lines that are almost overlapping, which we couldn't tell from the graph before. Those two lines that are almost overlapping start to diverge as of May, whatever year, May 2023, 2022. The diversion or the gap starts to widen as of August. Like, these are very interesting data points that were almost impossible to discern earlier. Now, I'm also complementing that graph with a very straightforward piece of narrative. I'm asking my leadership to approve the hire of 2 full-time employees. And I'm explaining why. Like, 2 employees quit in May. We nearly kept up with incoming volume in the following 2 months, right? So we're talking May, June, July. But then we fell behind with the increase in August, and we haven't been able to catch up since. Now, this is a marginally better version of the previous graph. Now, the graph is obviously straightforward now, you understand it. But that piece of narrative, if I was to provide that to my manager, my leadership, I would be shut down in no time. That narrative is not good enough. It's not fact-driven. It's not data-driven. There's too much that we don't know that it doesn't explain. Mind you, this is real life examples. Like, these things have actually happened. I'm not making any of this up. Now, how do we take this a step further even? And so let's go through that narrative real quick, right? We need something more precise, data-driven, fact-driven, with no weasel words. So let's go through the analysis of that, that text. So please approve the hire of 2 full-time employees, all right? What if I don't? If I'm the CEO of the company and you're asking me for considerable budget relieving 2 headcounts, you need to explain to me what happens if I don't do that, right? All of the words that end with ly, so they add sort of their attribute words that add some sort of color, but they don't really clarify much. So an example of that is nearly. We nearly kept up with the volume. What does nearly mean? It could be anything from 1% to 2 to 20 to 30 to 50%. It could be 10 cases, 20. Like, we don't know how much that is. We just know it's sort of nearly. Fair enough. That's not good enough, especially if people in finance and finance professionals or even analysts. Then we're explaining our audience that we fell behind. Great. How much behind? We could be like a few tickets away. We could be just like missing 2 or 3 every week or every month, and then we'll still be fine. And then we're mentioning an increase in August. What increase? Is there a cyclical increase? Are we expecting to see that again in December, in August next year? Like, if I release 2 people now, will you have the same problem in 6 months? All of this is information that's not coming through from the graph and is not coming through from the narrative. So let's take that a step even further. And during the course, obviously for the sake of time, we're not going to go through the whole process today, but during the course, I will teach you how to do this properly at scale and depending on the audience. Now, our narrative talks about, it's obviously increased in real estate. There's a lot more information here. But try to appreciate this, to focus on the things that really changed. So we're saying that since then, since May, the team struggled to maintain SLA on inbound tickets, right? So the SLA is the service level agreement, the average time that it takes us to process the tickets and to go back to the customers. That SLA used to be 24 hours. It now is 42.8 hours. which is almost an 80% deterioration to the target. If I'm reading this, if you take a moment to digest this, if I were to come to you, be like, hey, Mike, we have a problem with customer support. Our tickets take 78% more time to be processed than they used to. That is a bold statement. It's something that everyone understands, something that anyone would jump on their seats for, because it's not acceptable, right? There's definitely something wrong. Then we're going further, right? Which we coupled, so we lost 2 people, right? That caused the problem with the SLA. That was compounded with the seasonal back-to-school content increase that we see in August, whatever, just random, which created an even steeper backlog of 35 cases a month that are not handled on time. We're still not explaining the so what. We're really not explaining why we care about this, right? We're still explaining there's a big problem, but like the so what is still unclear, which is coming next. As a result of the slower turnaround, CSAT, which is customer satisfaction, has been deteriorating since. Like we have lost 0.5 points a month since May. And the number of 1 to 3 star reviews of our store, of our company, increased 25% in the same period. Now, this is a massive problem. We're impacting customer satisfaction, CSAT, reviews online are out there, people are pissed with our customer support, taking longer to go back to them, we're not able to ensure the SLA. Now, we have now painted a full picture that the leadership can resonate with, can understand, and can hopefully act upon. And so the last 3 lines, right? We are providing an action to ensure the customer satisfaction experience in this case does not deteriorate further. We ask the leadership to release 2 additional headcount to backfill the currently open recs. Awesome, straightforward, very clear, self-contained piece of narrative. I don't need slides. I don't need a meeting. I don't need anyone to explain me anything. If I receive this, I will be able to understand the whole end-to-end narrative and make a decision on the back of that. Just one piece that's potentially missing is the cost of that, right? Like, you know, the 2 additional FTEs for a total investment of 100K. We could have probably like complemented that or added that, but you know, it's mostly about the process and the mental process that we went through. And yeah, this is basically analytical storytelling during the course. And I think one takeaway is that you don't need to be born as a movie director or a bestseller author to do this, right? What we're doing is not an art, it's more of a science, and it can be learned. There's techniques, principles, frameworks that one can follow to help set the scene at the start, remove the clutter from you know, whatever you're trying to present, make it as straightforward as possible, then finding the right format which suits and fits with what you're trying to convey. As you can see, or as you saw, the first graph was showing, the first diagram was showing exactly the same information as the second, but it was the wrong format. The information was not coming through. Then we focus the attention of the audience on the things that really matter, the things that are really problematic. In the course, obviously with more time, we'll go into the psychology behind this and the psychological cues that one can leverage to make the process easier and to make this a science more than an art. And then at the end, we obviously told a story, which was a self-contained piece of narrative that really prompted the audience to take action. And that's what we did, right? If you look back, you can see exactly the same items in the 2 graphs, and sort of the story that went with it. And that was a really, really easy, straightforward, high-level example of what storytelling really is. Now, this gets me to the end of the webinar, of at least my presentation. We have a couple more slides. We definitely want to do the Q&A. I really hope you enjoyed this. I definitely did. As you can probably tell, I'm super passionate about the topic. I really love doing this. And yeah, sharing it with you all was obviously interesting and a pleasure for me today. Mike, I'll pass it on to you real quick so we can talk a
Yep.
bit more about the course.
Yeah. So we will run a course on this topic, of course, for professionals in this sphere. So this course provides a comprehensive understanding of financial data analysis that aims you to make a more rounded and competitive professional in the business world. So through the course, you will dive into various aspects of financial data analysis, including advanced Excel techniques. You will master financial statement analysis, gain proficiency in forecasting and modeling in Excel. You will also explore principles of financial storytelling and leverage the power of AI. Also, you will review and apply various tools, including Power Query and Power Pivot. And you will also become proficient in variance analysis, SQL queries, and different forecasting techniques. And what the main outcome here is that by the end of this course, you'll be able to build a dynamic Excel model under supervision of Federico, of course. And that model can be adapted to your business use cases. And also you will create a compelling executive dashboard to assess and present your findings to different stakeholders. So regarding the format of the course, so we start on July 31st. It's going to be 5 weeks of trainings, which ends on September 4th. And classes will take place on Mondays and Wednesdays at 6 p.m. UK time. So we start on July 31st. It's going to be Monday at 6 p.m. the first lesson. And in total, there will be 11 live Zoom classes. Each one is 90 minutes long. Just in case if you miss the lesson, it's not a problem. We record all of our session and they are available on the next day. So you can rewatch it anytime and be updated through all the course. And also you will have 7 home assignments that Federico will grade later after the course. And also he will provide to everyone like individual feedback to make sure you can apply all these principles and tools learned in the class directly to your work. And in the end of the course, you will receive also a certificate signed by Federico in digital format. So to learn more about this opportunity, do not hesitate to reach out to us. Our team will guide you through all the necessary steps so you can book your seat on this comprehensive program. Yeah. Regarding the course, basically, this is it. Yeah, thank you, Federico. Thank you for joining us today for this insightful webinar. I hope you all found this discussion and presentation valuable. We hope to see you on our course, of course. And also, I would like to thank everyone and each of you for your active participation, for your questions, engagement, and your presence just made this webinar a success. Yeah, so thank you. And if you have any further questions or would like to explore more about elevator experience, do not hesitate to reach out to us and we will help you.
Yeah, so there are a couple of questions in the Q&A. Thank you, Mike, by the way. Sure. I didn't go through the syllabus, but I think it's there. If anyone has questions, we can go back to it. Yeah, so there are a couple there. There's one from Katerina that regards security concerns when it comes to inputting financial statements into ChatGPT. That is definitely a spot on question. Now, what we have seen is that companies like large corporations, say Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and so forth, or anyone, Nike, and so forth, have started to develop policies to try and monitor the flow of data between, or even stop the flow of data between their internal systems and any external system. It was the case even before, right? But those policies have started to include ChatGPT amongst those limitations, just because of the questions around the data handling and data policies that are specific to ChatGPT in this case. Now, I guess the caveat that goes with it is that if you do work for a large corporation, you want to fit with the policy and the regulations that are in live within the company. However, the data is meant to be private and is not meant to be shared beyond ChatGPT or outside of the conversations that you're having with it. Now, that's the official narrative. I would be cautious doing that with real data, for sure. But one thing that you could definitely do would be to mimic or mock the real data that you have a certain way, right? Potentially multiplying your numbers by a certain factor, or sort of removing some of the more sensitive numbers and making mock assumptions for those. As long as, because I guess the point is to get outputs and answers back from ChatGPT that you can apply in your own, right, Excel model, whatever the case is. So you don't necessarily need to provide the actual number for the responses to still be relevant for what you're trying to accomplish. So in short, there's workarounds. Mike, a couple of folks are asking about the price of the course. Is it provided offline? How does that work? I think you're on mute.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, so regarding the price, we have different rounds of admission here. So just reach us out and we will give you the price that we have right now.
Okay. That's interesting. So a lot of people ask about threats to financial specialists that ChatGPT or similar technology might have. There's obviously like a long-term aspect to it, because technically from what you've seen, you don't really need me to type anything into ChatGPT for ChatGPT to provide the answer. It could be, that communication could be streamlined, and I could remove myself from the back and forth. And so if a bot was to provide questions into ChatGPT, ChatGPT could answer, as long as those answers are then fed back into the Excel, whatever case may be, right? It could be a Power BI or Tableau type of solution. That would have obviously create problems or threats to the roles of financial analysts. Now, there is still, though, the human factor that goes into assessing the quality of the output and also the relevancy of sort of the insights. And analyzing the data does require context and business understanding that ChatGPT will never have, at least not anytime soon. And so for now, I think we're more than fine. Like, I don't really think this poses any threats, other than the fact that we should start to leverage it to improve our day-to-day and streamline our operations, because that's technology that's already out there, and not using it, it's a missed opportunity. Now, from that to taking over our roles and making us redundant, I think there's still a long way to go. And potentially there will always be a gap, which is the sort of the human judgment and the human factor. That's my 2 cents, by the way, not an official line of answer from anyone. I guess we'll see. Awesome. Anything else? Is an interest in finance and finance analyst enough? Oh, yeah. So, Donald, that's actually a good question. Let me go back 1 second on, and then I'll also answer to your question, Julia. So, the course is mostly designed for people that do work in finance that have limited experience, though, like 2 or 3 years of financial analysis experience. It's probably where the sweet spot is. We will take that experience, take it a step further, right? We will index a lot on financial storytelling, which obviously applies and can benefit really anyone. But from a technical standpoint, if you've been using Excel for a couple of years as in your day-to-day, you will still benefit from the course, but you will have a lot of the understanding on which we will build upon. Now, I think where the course really will really be beneficial is for junior finance professionals that might be at the start of their career, because this will really help you fast track your first 5 or 6 years of learning experience in finance, in corporate finance at least. But it will also be beneficial to business owners, right? Managers, even business owners like entrepreneurs, startup owners, and anyone in between, product managers and so forth. People that might have had exposure to data analysis. Obviously, any sort of data goes back to finance, or 90% of it. So I think this is still a really wide umbrella. But they might be missing the foundations, right? The basis to really build advanced analysis, analytical models, and really like challenge the assumptions of other teams that they might be working with, because they lack this sort of understanding. So I think this is who we are carrying the course towards. the short answer to your question, Donald, is yes. As long as you have a bit of experience with Excel. Now, Julia or Yulia, apologies if I'm mispronouncing. Yes, we didn't talk about Bard and Bling. I mentioned that at the start. They work the same way. The quality can sometimes be comparable. ChatGPT has become a stable name. Everyone talks about ChatGPT as the synonym of generative AI. And so we went with it just because it's the most popular. And as far as I've seen, I tried Bard. The answers or the outputs were subpar from what we were trying to do here. It might just be a question of use cases, but they should work the same way. I actually encourage you to go and test it, test them, and see what works best. They all work the same way. So senior finance managers, would it be interesting? I don't see why not. Like, I'm happy to take potentially, I don't know if we can, Mike or others from Elevator on the course, but I would be happy to take some of these questions offline to go through the syllabus a bit more sort of one-off, especially if people think are on the cusp of potentially being too tenured, being too experienced. More than happy to have the conversation offline. I really want to make sure that whoever joins has to learn and take something away from the course. If you are a senior finance manager of a smaller company, potentially a company where systems are more dated or where the I don't know, the level of modeling is potentially simpler, more straightforward, then you could definitely benefit from the course. Again, we will also talk about other things, like there is SQL, there is the financial storytelling part, there's definitely Gen AI, but there's really like modeling. We'll go through the building of a model, of a forecasting model for a transportation business over the course of 2 classes. We'll learn how to build a cockpit, how to make it dynamic, how to challenge assumptions that came in from business owners, and how to really leverage that to our advantage. So these are all things that we'll cover. I guess the level of depth and breadth will also depend on the audience that will eventually subscribe and join us. But if anyone wants to take anything offline, I'm sure you have my email. If not, you can go through Elevator. Actually, that might be better so that we have all the questions in one place, and then I'm happy to answer offline. Anyone else? Or anything else? Any more? I hope I didn't miss any questions. All right. I think this is a wrap.
Yeah, I think this is it. Thanks all for coming. Yeah, it was really insightful and amazing webinar. We wish you all the best in your future endeavors. Take care of yourselves, your teams, your organizations, and goodbye until we meet again, right?
For sure. Have a good one, yeah.
Sure.
Good night.
Bye-bye.